Have you ever wanted to just bonk your sibling over the head with a rock? I haven't, because I'm not completely crazy, but I'm sure that a number of y'all have at least thought about it. And if you have, I'll let you know from the start, you're not alone. There are numerous examples of the practice of fratricide in various literary and cultural traditions across the planet. And today, I'll do my best to break down a few of these examples, and the common cultural feelings on the act of, murdering your sibling. Now, the main structure of this video came from a channel I adore called Overly Sarcastic Productions. The two hosts focus on literature and history respectively, with Red hosting a series called Trope Talk, in which he analyzes various literary tropes. From this, I felt like blending this concept with history instead of literature would create an excellent series, so I hope this video will be able to do both of these amazing creators justice. When talking about a concept as morally complex as fratricide, I think it would be beneficial to define exactly what fratricide is. The act of fratricide is when an individual commits the act of murder against their sibling. The murder aspect is the key. We aren't talking about a tragic accident where a person causes the death of their sibling. We are talking about the deliberate act of snuffing out a life. Let this be your first warning. Some of the topics we will be discussing today won't be for the faint of heart. So if the idea of, murder isn't appealing to you, I'd recommend finding something else to watch. Sorry. Now, the first instance of fratricide I will touch on will be one of its most famous examples. The story of Cain and Abel. This tale is a part of the Old Testament of the Bible and details an account of what is supposedly the first murder. Now, I know we said we'd be focusing on history rather than literature, but to not talk about this work would be incredibly stupid. I find the fact that the first murder in the most prolific religion on the planet is between two brothers to be fairly illuminating. It puts into perspective a clear rivalry that is inherent to the interpersonal relationships between siblings, and more intensely, brothers. In the story, we see the brothers Cain and Abel living their lives in service of God. One is a shepherd, while the other is a farmer. One day, they offer the fruits of their labor to God. And when he looks upon them, he favors Abel's offering of a lamb over Cain's gift of crops. This snub enrages Cain to the point where he ends up murdering his brother in a rage. The jealousy and inadequacy was just too much to bear. To transition this into a historical lens, the issue of inheritance can be seen as one of the most common reasons for instability in a nation. The wars fought over brothers for the throne can be seen as a almost seminal event in every nation's past history. I mean, just look at any European country and you can find numerous examples of brothers fighting over the throne, land, and probably even a bucket if you search hard enough. These conflicts can make sense when you remove emotions from the equation, but we aren't robots, now are we? The promises of riches and power can make man commit the worst of crimes. To come back to the story of Cain and Abel, the theme of jealousy is shown as the catalyst for Cain's transgression. To gain what you believe you are owed, arrogance and entitlement are truly what characterize this act. To murder your brother, to disregard the immutable truth of your blood is to spit in the face of morality. This is a key aspect of what the story of Cain and Abel strives to tell. The fact that this story, which was a part of the religion in which much of the Western world followed for over a millennium, is so blatantly disregarded in many of the cultures it influenced, creates an interesting juxtaposition between the moral standards stated in the Bible and reality. Another layer that becomes clear when looking at this phenomenon is the idea of paranoia and its effect on our actions. To better understand what I mean by this, let's touch on some historical examples of fratricide. The Ottoman Empire was an incredibly powerful and influential nation which dominated the entirety of the Middle East and even began to pressure Europe and Asia. This Islamic nation would dominate this region for centuries before falling in the aftermath of World War I. I know you might be confused about why I'm giving you this seemingly irrelevant information, but those of you that have some knowledge on the Ottoman Empire will see where I'm going with this. The practice of fratricide was incredibly common among the royal family. Now, this may not really sound as significant, as fratricide, while not occurring all the time, was never out of the question for most culture's ruling class. The prevalence and sheer scale that would be demonstrated by the Ottomans would put these other civilizations to shame. You see, fratricide was state-sanctioned, as Mehmed II legalized it in response to the power struggle that took place during his ascension to the throne. While there had been legal precedent for the practice in cases of rebellion and the like, this situation would mark a turning point. With his rise to the position of Sultan, Mehmed would codify the permissibility of fratricide for the ruler of the empire to ensure the common benefit of the people. This justification could essentially be summed up with the idea that the house divided against itself cannot stand. Thanks, Abe. With that being said, it's very easy to discount this as a vicious power play used to ensure the legitimacy of Mehmed's ascension. But it would be narrow-minded to not consider why the Sultan considered such a policy to be necessary. Rebellions and uprisings among the nobility and those of royal lineage are almost universal when it comes to empires, and the Ottomans were definitely not immune. Their culture differed from many others insofar as all sons, regardless of birth order, had an equal claim to the throne. This difference would be the main contributor for the necessity of this law in the eyes of Mehmed. The threat of one of your snot-nosed brothers rising up against you was not simply a threat in many eyes. It was more like an inevitability. As time progressed, the management of heirs in the empire would be refined. The Sultan or ruler of the empire would place his many sons in different provinces as governors to prepare them to rule the nation as they would gain experience through their new role. However, the purpose of this was twofold, as when the Sultan would pass, a mad dash to the capital city would begin, as the first son to arrive would gain control of the armies, giving him an advantage in taking care of his siblings, if you catch my drift. Oftentimes, the rulers would place his favorite son closer to the capital to give them an advantage in the eventual race for supremacy. This is obviously pretty messed up. But the question we have to ask is, what is the utility of this system? If it didn't have a purpose, it wouldn't have existed for the centuries it had. One of the major factors that led to the downfall of many a dynasty was internal strife and division that would occur in the immediate aftermath of a ruler's death, as their many children jockeyed for position. And as stated earlier, the question of legitimacy was irrelevant in this case, as so-called crown princes only had marginally more authority than their brothers. It was not uncommon for lesser favored sons to defeat their brothers to claim the throne. The act of tipping the scales and adding chaos could be seen as making victories and losses more extreme, preventing long, drawn-out engagements, which would put the dynasty at risk of collapse. This system would eventually somewhat fall out of vogue, as instead of murder, imprisonment of potential rivals would be the new norm. This, however, would bring up new problems, such as the case of Sultan Ibrahim, but that situation is outside the scope of today's video, so I'll leave it at that. Let me know if you'd like me to make a video about him in the future. He is a funny man. So here's the deal. I've talked about what feels like a lot, and there are still a few things that I wanted to speak about, but I feel like this is a decent stopping point for today. So I'll just leave it at that for now. This is like the first video in what will hopefully be a series, I would like that any of you who have gotten to the end, please leave a comment or suggestion about how you felt about the video. If it was complete garbage, don't hesitate to say it. I'll only cry for 5 minutes per mean comment. So go wild. If you liked what you saw, why not drop a like, a follow, or check out some of my other videos. Any support is greatly appreciated. With that being said, have a great day. Clint signing off. Deuces.